Welcome to the Viking Age podcast, the official podcast of thevikingage.com. My name is Schad. I write for Zone Coverage, the Viking Age, Bring Me the News, and the Brookings Register. We do this every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode and we can spread the word to the masses. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Sunday's matchup with the Chicago Bears, but first we have a special guest. He's been doing football analytics for over 20 years. He is the creator of Defense Adjusted Value Over Average, more commonly known as DVOA, formerly of Football Outsiders, but now he is currently with FTN Fantasy. His name is Aaron Schatz. Welcome to the show, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and you know, they kind of approached me about having you on the show and promoting DVOA and everything else. I have used it a little bit in my articles, and I mean, I've read the introduction to DVOA, but I think a lot of casual fans see it and they see a number attached to it and they don't really know what it is. For the casual football fan, how would you describe DVOA and how did you come up with this stat?
The basic idea is that it judges the success of every play based on the down and distance. So that 10 yards on 3rd and 15 means something different than 10 yards on 2nd and 10. And then it compares that to a league average baseline and adjusts for situation and opponent. The basic idea is how efficient you are, based on the situations that you're in and the opponents that you face. I had a bunch of questions about the league, and I put together a database of stats back in 2002, and then I got some ideas out of a book called The Hidden Game of Football, and I kind of took those ideas to the next level, and DVOA was the result. We launched Football Outsiders in 2003, and I've been doing this ever since.
So what is the difference between like DVOA and a success rate? Because success rate is something that I've used where I believe Pro Football Reference calls it as the amount of times of a running back. If you have 1st and 10, it's, I think 40% of yards on 1st down, 60% on 2nd down, and 100 on 3rd and 4th. What's the difference between DVOA and maybe success rate? That's something
right. It builds on success rate.
Okay.
By giving bonuses to longer plays and penalties to things like turnovers and lost yardage, so that it's not just a binary 1 or 0, and then comparing to the average of that type of situation. Because, for example, if you have a short yardage back, he's going to have a high success rate because he's in situations where success is more likely. So what you want to do is compare him to other short yardage backs in similar situations. You don't want to compare that guy to the guy who gets the ball on the draw on 3rd and 12, because that guy's not going to have success very often.
Right. So in the same scope, when we look at DVOA, because right now the Vikings, for example, and we'll get into this a little bit, the Vikings defense has the number 1 defensive DVOA at 24.9%. When we look at these numbers, what can they tell us about a football team?
I mean, they basically tell you, because they can be broken down play by play, they can tell you a lot of different things. Mostly what DVOA tells you is what, and then you need to study the film to figure out why. But what I can tell you is when a team is really good in certain ways, their run defense is really efficient or their passing game is really efficient, much better than the old school like total yardage stats. Total yardage stats are terrible, especially for defense, because of course, when you're leading the game in the second half, you give up a lot of passing yards because the other team stops running the ball because they have to catch up. So DVOA considers all this stuff and then tells you where the team's strengths and weaknesses are. And then you use film to figure out, well, it's because of this player, or the scheme, or they play zone in this way or whatever. That's why they're so good at that, right? Okay.
So when we look at the Vikings right now, the Vikings have the 4th overall DVOA at 22.9%. As we mentioned, Vikings defense has the number 1 defensive DVOA at, actually, I think I got them mixed up here. I believe it's negative 1.3%. Or no. I got it right. 24.9.
Yeah, 24.9 is the number.
Yes. And then 17th in offensive DVOA at negative 1.3 and 20th in special teams at negative 0.7. I want to start with the defense, because what is it about this Vikings defense that gives them such a high, or in this case, low number in DVOA?
Yeah, it's a combination of different things. So they have the lowest success rate allowed on defense. And they're something like 5th or 6th in yards per play. And they're like 3rd or something in turnovers. So they basically do it all. Success rate is the basis of DVOA, but then you also consider the yards and the turnovers. But they're very good in those. They're just very good in all the areas of defense, and they're very good against both the pass and the run.
So when you look at the sum of all parts and everything that they have, is this a championship caliber defense? Because the DVOA would suggest it. And when you look at every number on this team, that might be the way they have to go to not only win the North, but make a deep run in the playoffs.
Yes, this is a championship quality defense. The problem is that there's two problems. The first is that usually you've got to have a good offense. At least, like, there are teams with the defense this good that have won championships with subpar offenses, like the Broncos in 2015 or the Ravens in 2000. But usually you do want your offense to be a little bit better than what the Vikings have had. The other problem is that defense is less predictive and consistent than offense. So the likelihood that the Vikings defense will stay this good is less than the likelihood that, for example, the Baltimore Ravens offense will stay as good as it is, because offense just generally tends to be more consistent.
And I think, too, you've seen some of the cracks in the Vikings offensively in recent weeks. The running game's not as good as it has been. Aaron Jones has kind of struggled since that initial 5-week stretch to open the season. And Sam Darnold, I feel like that's everybody's answer. It's like, well, the Vikings are good, but they also have Sam Darnold. Like, is he the reason why the Vikings are so low? Because he's had a lot of turnovers this year. He's had a lot of mishaps. Or is there something else the Vikings can do to get that number up to where it needs to be?
One thing I will say about Darnold, at FTN, we chart what we call the turnover-worthy throws. He's not that high in the turnover-worthy throws. So essentially, Darnold has had bad luck where his turnover-worthy throws keep turning into actual turnovers, whereas for other quarterbacks, they may get dropped by the defense. So he's kind of had bad luck on that. But he's an average quarterback, lifted by the scheme, by the coach, and by the receivers that he has. And, in some ways by the tackles, although not now that Darisaw is injured, not as much, right? So they need to go on a run. In order to win in the playoffs, Darnold has to go on a run where he plays better than this. And that's just, given his history, it's difficult to imagine, but not impossible to imagine that he could go on that run.
No, I think people too wonder, you said it's a lot with the scheme. It's a lot with the infrastructure around him. Some people, even with the news about JJ McCarthy's knee, they're kind of wondering, hey, can you get him back at a somewhat cheaper rate? Do you think the way Darnold has been playing is sustainable? Or do you think there's going to be another team that's going to look at all this, be like, we can fix him, like the typical NFL coach speak, and turn him into a,
I think
another,
it's sustainable for Darnold to be average, but when you have the number 10 pick in your pot, waiting to come back in, you don't spend money on a guy who's average. It would make no sense for the Vikings to bring Darnold back next year at any kind of an advanced salary, because what you're going to get mostly is average, and McCarthy sitting on the bench, and you don't want that. You want to play McCarthy. They'll need to have some sort of a veteran backup of some sort, but it's not going to be Darnold.
And especially when you look at some of the other holes in this team, like at guard, they need a defensive lineman. They need cornerbacks. Half of them
cornerbacks are playing well, but they're old.
Yep. There's just a ton of things that you look at when you see that, but those are obviously conversations to have down the road. And when you look at where the Vikings are at right now compared to the top of the league, they're in the top 5 of DVOA. Detroit is at 49.8% right now. Baltimore is 35.7%. Buffalo is 24.4%. You have the Vikings at 22.9% and Kansas City at 21.4%. Just from a purple lens, maybe putting on purple colored glasses, I would watch the game from week 7 where the Vikings jumped out to a 10-point lead. Detroit came back 21 points. You might say the gap would be smaller than that in DVOA, but what do you feel the Lions do that have such a big advantage when it comes to this divisional race?
I mean, that's the thing about DVOA is that it looks at every game. It doesn't just look at the one game where these two teams played each other. If you looked at just that game, the Lions would be lower, but then they go out and do what they did to Jacksonville. And the fact is, historically, the best indicator of championship teams is the way that they destroy the bad teams on their schedule. It's not winning close games against good teams. The best indicator of a championship team is that when they play a bad team, they destroy them. And that's what the Lions have done in a couple of their games this year. And that's why they are so outrageously high in DVOA. And I would definitely give them the advantage over Minnesota to win the division and the advantage if the two of them play in the playoffs.
It almost feels like you have Detroit and they're just kind of above and beyond. And then you have the rest of the NFC and it's like a series of coin flips. Like, do you think the Vikings are the second best? I mean, according to DVOA, the answer is yes. But I mean, do you feel like they're the second best team in the NFC? Because it's so close together right now. Because
of the way teams are trending, the Vikings have trended down a little bit in recent weeks, and the Vikings have trended up. The Eagles have trended up. And because of offense being more predictive than defense, I would probably take the Eagles as the number 2 team in the NFC right now. Then the Vikings, and then the 49ers.
So, I mean, it also matters too when you consider the Eagles have a better chance to win their division than the Vikings do.
They're probably going to be the 2. Yeah, they're probably going to be the 2 seed, and the Vikings are probably going to be the 5.
Yes. So looking at everything together, if we should take anything away from this discussion, what should it be about the Vikings and what should it be about the rest of the league? Because it seemed like it's a pretty wide open year.
That the Vikings defense is better than a lot of the standard stats would indicate. They've also played the schedule. They have a positive schedule adjustment from the schedule they've played. So there's a lot of reasons why the Vikings defense is just really, really good. Brian Flores has done a really great job as the coordinator this year. And that the Vikings are absolutely in the mix. And that Kevin Seifert, I talked to Kevin Seifert about this a couple of days ago, that this is not the team from 2 years ago. This is not the team that 2 years ago that won all those ridiculous close games in ridiculous fashion and were not very good in any of the underlying stats and were like the craziest, luckiest outperforming team like ever. This is not that. This is a team that really does deserve to be 8-2, that is really playing. Just because it's the defense that's outstanding rather than the offense doesn't mean they don't deserve to be 8-2. Like they're really an 8-2 team and they're really in it. It's just that they have to contend with a division rival that is having a ridiculously good season right now.
I think too, I was kind of playing around with the charts because you can go to FTN Fantasy, you can look up all the DVOA, there's offense, defense, special teams, and everything. One of the things that I found the most appealing was expected wins. And I went back in that 2022 season because I was kind of like, I wonder what it was like. Vikings won 13 games, expected wins were 5.9. So
yeah,
they won
28th in DVOA. They went 13-4 and they ranked 28. It is that team won in such ridiculous, the Bills fumbling the snap and the Colts, the comeback against the Colts, and just crazy. And isn't it ironic? It's very likely that the Vikings are going to face Kirk Cousins in the playoff. There is a really good chance that Atlanta wins the 4 and the Vikings win the 5. And that's your first round game.
As someone who went to that New York Giants game in 2022 and saw Kirk Cousins throw past the sticks, I have tremendous PTSD of just seeing Kirk Cousins dropping back.
Oh, the playoff game where
game on the line, throws a dagger downfield. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess, just a bonus question off the top of my head, we're going to see Atlanta in a couple of weeks. What do you think of the Falcons? Are they similar to that 2022 team, or,
No,
what are they?
They're better than that team was, and they don't have as many wins. They are the lowest winning team in DVOA. So I think they're 17th at 6-5. So they've got a good offense and a multiple offense, right? They can attack you in a lot of different ways with the different stars that they have. Mooney in particular is having a very good season. Like, people know Drake London is really good, but Mooney is also having a really good season. Their defense is lousy, and they have no pass rush. They have no pass rush. Like, Matthew Judon was supposed to be the guy who goosed their pass rush, and it just hasn't happened for him this year. And so they're not as good as the Vikings. Like, the Vikings will be favored. If it's the Vikings go to Atlanta in the first round, the Vikings will be favored.
I mean, they might have taken a pass rusher at 8. I don't know what really happened there, but
we want to relitigate all the discussions we had about the Falcons in the offseason. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. One more bonus question. Final. Let me just ask you this point blank. You said championship caliber defense needs a little bit more from offense. Do you think the Vikings have enough to either go to the Super Bowl or win the whole thing? Because that's what we want to know over here. Like, is this a Cinderella season that's going to end with Sam Darnold holding up the Lombardi trophy?
I would say that it's not likely, but if you ask me, which teams are real Super Bowl contenders, we went through this thing a few years ago where we had a period of time where teams got into the tournament and then went on these ridiculous runs in the playoffs, teams that weren't that good in the regular season.
Right.
For the last decade or so, you really have had to be in the top 6 or 7 teams to be a real Super Bowl contender. If you judge it in that way, the Vikings are one of the actual Super Bowl contenders, but they're just on the edge of it because that defense is good enough to do it. If the offense can raise its game for a couple of weeks, the defense is good enough. But it's not as likely as Detroit or Philly or one of the big three, the AFC big three, which is Kansas City, Buffalo, and Baltimore.
Awesome. So there you go. Place your bets, everybody. You can look at DVOA. A quick question before I let you go, Aaron. What's going on at FTN Fantasy, and what do you do over there?
I just want to, it's DVOA stuff is great, and the Stats Hub where we have charting, and you can get DVOA in charting categories live during the season in a way we've never been able to do before. You can find out how good Sam Darnold is against zone and against man in a way we've never been able to do live during the season. But we also have FTN Fantasy has tons of stuff for daily fantasy players, optimizer tools, betting tools and picks, and stuff in other sports besides the NFL. I only do the NFL, but we have people who do everything from basketball to golf to tennis, winning picks in all kinds of sports. So I absolutely recommend checking out FTN and becoming a subscriber, ftnfantasy.com.
Well, thank you, Aaron, for coming on. We appreciate the time, and it was good to learn something about one of the most popular metrics in football today.
Yeah, and I wish the Vikings good luck, because I will say this, which is, it's ironic for me to say this as a Patriots fan, but I like when teams that haven't won it get to win it. So the Vikings are one of the teams that I would love to see win it this year. I mean, it would be great to see Detroit win it. It would be great to see Buffalo win it. It would be great to see Minnesota win it. We've done Kansas City. We don't need to do that. We don't need to do that again. It's been done.
It was fun the first time. It was oh, cool, they got a quarterback. But now it's
surprise is San Francisco, because San Francisco, they've won championships in other sports in San Francisco. But San Francisco hasn't won the Super Bowl in 30 years. So they're kind of long suffering. You wouldn't think of the 49ers fans as long suffering, but they're kind of long suffering, but not as long as the Vikings fans. So it would be nice. It would be fun to see the Vikings do it.
As I always joke with people, you don't know real pain until you're a Vikings fan.
A
Aaron,
Detroit, Minnesota NFC Championship game where one of those teams was guaranteed to go to the Super Bowl would be a lot of fun.
and if the Bills went on the other side,
Would be even more fun.
That'd be even crazier. We're just fantasy booking here. I love it. Hopefully the Vikings can finish the story. And once again, thanks for coming on, Aaron.
Thanks for having me on.
Once again, a special thank you to Aaron Schatz for coming on from NTN Fantasy to talk about DVOA. We'll mention that every now and then, probably a little bit while we're talking about the matchup with the Vikings and the Bears. But first, I want to remind you that Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all of your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players by just selecting higher or lower on 2 or more players' stats, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money, so you can turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. Underdog is the best place to cash in on all of your takes this football season. Which players are going off, which ones are ice cold. Make your entries in just a few taps and turn your sports opinions into real money. Underdog also has vulture protection. If you select a designated running back to score a touchdown in your pick'em entry and they get vultured, we will rescue your entry. And Underdog also has a game known as Red Zone Rush, a game you won't find anywhere else. Just pick whether or not a player will score a touchdown by swiping right for yes or left for no. It's as simple as that. Plus, your entry will automatically be boosted, and you'll get a 51% profit boost when you play. I've been using the Underdog Fantasy app. You've heard me talk about it for weeks here on the Viking Age podcast, but I'm going to get into it a little on the next couple of days. You got a little Thursday night football action. I mean, the Steelers and the Browns, like, I don't know if you're not doing pick'ems and going higher or lower. What are you even doing watching that game? And then, of course, you got the Vikings and the Bears game as well. Maybe you like Justin Jefferson. Maybe you like a Caleb Williams interception. Lots of options to choose from, and you can win some cash too. So download the Underdog Fantasy app today. Use the code THEAGE. That's all in one word. And you can get up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Again, download the app today. Use the code THEAGE and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Select higher or lower on your favorite players and cash in on Underdog. You must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. If you are concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, that's 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. And in New York, call the 1-800 the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That's 467-369. Almost got through that without a stammer, but hey, we're good. Underdog's going to be happy. We got everything going, and now we can check in on the Vikings in what week are we in? 12? Week 12, yes. I just set my fantasy lineup. I should know that because apparently everybody is on mine this week. So a lot of teams are in Cabo, but the Vikings will be a little north of that. They'll actually be in Chicago Sunday at noon, Soldier Field. Kevin Kugler, Daryl Johnson, and Laura Okerman will be on the call for Fox. The Vikings, as of Wednesday evening when I'm recording this, favored by 3.5 points. And what are we looking for on Sunday afternoon? I think it gets back to my overreaction from Monday. Number one, I wrote about it at Zone Coverage. It's kind of taken off the last couple of days. A lot of people are looking at that interior offensive line, and they're looking at the run game. Christian Darrisaw is not limping through that tunnel, unfortunately. He's out for the season with a multi-ligament knee injury. Cam Robinson, he's all right. I mean, he's probably better than David Questenberry. I did not look up his pass protection stats from the last game. He had a really bad game in Jacksonville. Felt like he did better on Sunday, though, against the Titans. And, in the run game, he's just not as mobile, so you can't run those pitches. You can't have him get out in front of Aaron Jones and clear the way like Christian Darrisaw did. And it's starting to show. Reisner's a little bit of a downgrade in the run blocking game as well, but Kevin O'Connell obviously wants to keep Sam Darnold upright, especially since he has the highest time to throw, or one of the highest time to throws in the National Football League right now. Alec Lewis, the Athletic, wrote a very long piece about this, and he was talking about Aaron Jones, who hasn't run for 100 yards since week 3. He hasn't scored rushing touchdowns since week 7. And the Vikings never blow anyone out, so they haven't been able to rest him. And even when they have, it's been a trust issue. Early in the year, they wanted Ty Chandler to get that role. And you guys know how much I love Ty Chandler, but he has not seized that role. He didn't seize the role to the point where the Vikings traded for Cam Akers the second straight season, and they put him as the backup running back. And Akers hasn't been special either. You're not looking for anyone to be special per se, but you want to have a level of upside. And I feel like a level of upside while the ability to do a consistent job. I don't feel like Cam Akers or Ty Chandler provide any of that. And we could sit here and we could talk about who they're going to draft and if they're going to dip into this 2025 running back class. I almost said 2022. My brain's still stuck on there from our conversation with Aaron. But they need to fix it right now because Aaron Jones is going to turn 30 in a couple of weeks here. He's already banged up. He's gutting through some injuries right now. And now he has an offensive line that can't really clear any holes for them. And if the Vikings become one-dimensional, you saw what happened last year. Now, that was a little bit different because Justin Jefferson had a hamstring injury. So the running game was also affected by the fact you didn't have a legitimate quarterback with Kirk Cousins on the sidelines, and Justin Jefferson was also on the sideline with that hamstring injury. Now you have the passing pieces, but do you have enough in the running game? Like, this doesn't need to be 2020 or 2012. I almost said 2022 again. I don't know what's happening. 2012 Adrian Peterson. This just needs to be adequate. This just needs to be efficient. This just needs to move the ball. And the Vikings have had trouble with that the last couple of weeks. Part of that is you faced a pretty good run defense in Tennessee. I'm not sure if Jacksonville's run defense. I remember picking Aaron Jones higher on underdog. So I think I read something like they're not good, but the Vikings still couldn't run the ball against the Jaguars either. It's been a theme. So does Aaron Jones find the fountain of youth for 1 week and he has a big game, or does Cam Akers or Ty Chandler step up and get a few more carries so you can give Jones a breather? Because I think he's one of the most important players on the Vikings down the stretch. And I think that running game is super important when you consider how much Sam Darnold needs to be successful. Not in the same way maybe the previous quarterback that was here had it, but that was weird. I don't know. Okay. I'll find my thing again. Not in the same way the previous quarterback had it, but it's still important. They have to be able to run the ball, especially as we get further down the line here. The other thing that I'm watching is Kevin O'Connell against Matt Eberflus's defense. And you might laugh at that because Matt Eberflus is going to get fired. Like, he is basically going through a death march unless the Bears like find it again and they start winning games and they get to the playoffs. I think the Bears are going to be looking for a new quarterback next offseason. And it's an interesting juxtaposition. It's an interesting comparison, I guess I should say. Both Kevin O'Connell and Matt Eberflus were hired in 2022. There you go. There's that number again. And this time I'm correct. They're both attached through each team's rebuild, where Chicago went scorched earth and the Vikings went with the competitive rebuild thing. Kevin O'Connell, 28-16 as a head coach in the NFL. Out of that 2022 class, him and Mike McDaniel in Miami are the only two head coaches with a winning record. Matt Eberflus way down there, 14-30. You felt like they had some momentum especially at the end of last year. They get Caleb Williams, they get Roma Dunze in the draft, they add Keenan Allen, they go buy, not buy, but they sign DeAndre Swift in free agency. They add a couple of other pieces. You're feeling like they're going in the right direction, especially with the 4-2 start. And since the bye week, it just has not worked. They fired Shane Waldron, their offensive coordinator. But I mean, a lot of it is Matt Eberflus's defense. He's a defensive coach. That's what he knows. And the last 2 games against Eberflus have not been masterpieces by the Vikings. They won 19-13 at Soldier Field in October 2023. There was no Justin Jefferson in that game, so take that for what you will. Also, the Bears came back and they won 12-7 in Minneapolis last December. Also, no Justin Jefferson and no Kirk Cousins in that game. So if you're just looking at, well, Justin Jefferson on the field, they should roll. Absolutely. But Chicago's DVOA, there's that stat again. They're 15th in the league right now. They held the Packers to 20 points last week. And I think they can make quarterbacks make bad decisions. Like, they're not a trash unit. So I want to see Sam Darnold make good decisions again. I want to see all the Vikings weapons get involved. I'm talking about Justin Jefferson. I'm talking about TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, all of those guys. I think this could be, I don't think they're going to go out and hang 50 like the Lions have been doing the last couple of weeks, but you should be able to move the ball. At the very least, you should have the same offensive success that you had against Indianapolis and Jacksonville. Jacksonville minus the turnovers, obviously, but you should be able to hang on. If you hang on to the ball, which is another thing we should talk about, but if you're able to hang on the ball, you do what you need to do, you should be fine in that regard. Final thing that I'm kind of thinking about, and again, this is early in the week, so we don't have a ton of injury information. This episode, I'm assuming it'll be out on Thursday, maybe Friday, so you can look up the injury report from there. But there's not really an injury that I'm kind of really concerned about, like maybe Josh Oliver's ankle, because they are mixing in TJ Hawkinson a little bit slowly coming off that injury, which is fine. I mean, if you're having him full blast in the playoffs, I'm totally okay with it, especially since you're in this stretch of the soft schedule, as they've called it. But, can the Vikings smash a bad team? And I've been on the crew saying, what's wrong with winning? And there's absolutely nothing with winning. I mean, stack those wins. You have the bank. You're 8-2. According to FTN and Aaron Schatz's work, the Vikings have an estimated 8.6 wins this season, which is really good. We were talking about the 2022 team, and they only had 6 wins. So the Vikings, looking at this, you can sit there and say, okay, they're winning the games they're supposed to win. That's good. But as we just got done hearing Aaron talk about, good teams, Super Bowl caliber teams, smash bad ones. And also, too, like I've been saying this throughout the year, but I mean, it is still kind of house money. You're not sitting here going like they have to win the Super Bowl or bust. Like if they lose in the playoffs, we're all going to be disappointed and a little bit sad about it. And like, how do you get back there? But you feel like the bones of a contender are there. They're building a foundation. I know that's kind of a buzzword for, coping with playoff failures, but a lot of people didn't expect this team to go far. You start 5-0, now you're 8-2. A lot of people are going, can you win that Super Bowl? Can you compete with Detroit, Philadelphia, some of the big hitters in the NFC? With the Bears, like this is a team that's 23rd in overall DVOA. Their offensive line is terrible. They're on their second offensive coordinator of the season. Their quarterback is still learning how to do like simple stuff like call protections and change play calls and all of those things. Like they have a cornerback that's more concerned with going viral with catchy interviews and taunting the fans on Hail Marys than the other. Like this is not a bad team in the same way that Tennessee was a bad team, because like you just watch them and you like, these guys are dumb. Like I don't think the Bears are dumb, like bad. I think the Bears have some talent, but they're also not there. And I think a lot of that has to do with coaching. I want to walk away from this game thinking the Vikings kick their ass. Because if you kick the Bears' ass and you hammer them, because they are down bad compared to the rest of the division right now. So if you go in and you mop the floor with the Bears, you're feeling pretty good about that coming home with a stretch against other teams. Like Arizona looks pretty good right now. I don't have their DVOA in front of me, but that's a tougher game than we thought it would be at the beginning of the year. You get Kirk Cousins and the Falcons right after that. I know Aaron was just saying he would favor the Vikings, but we're also, there's no analytic for Kirk O'Chain's revenge game. So you have to consider that. You got Detroit down the stretch. You got Green Bay down the stretch. I think there's a trip to Seattle, which they may not be a good team, but going to, I was going to call it Quest Field. I don't know what it's called anymore. That is no joke. So I want confidence. I want to walk out of this game. And yes, it's a style points argument. Like, okay, winning is good, but it's not good enough because I want them to look like the 98 Vikings or whatever. No, I want to see this team increase my confidence in some level, because I think the last 2 weeks haven't really done, last 3 weeks really haven't done it. I still know this is a good team. Is it a team that can win a championship? Defensively, I think the answer is yes. Offensively, you have to figure some stuff out. And maybe it's one of those things where you're not going to get the answer until you get JJ McCarthy or whoever it may be under center in 2025. And by the way, don't come at me with that Aaron Rodgers talk, because we live in a world where a lot of us write articles and we try to get people to click on it. And some places will write about anything. Popular NFL team, winning NFL team travels to popular travel destination. Wow, click. I wonder what that story is. It's very small. I'm walking a very fine line here. But when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, that dude, anything he touches turns into a toxic wasteland. You want to put him in this culture with Kevin O'Connell, where it's a team building thing, and you want Aaron Rodgers to come in and be like, I'm running the show now. Hell no. Hell no. I am not letting him anywhere near this building unless it's at US Bank Stadium getting his ass kicked by this defense. It is a terrible idea. And I know people want to point, people said Brett Favre would never come here. Completely different situation, because Brad Childress was going to get fired if he didn't go deeper into the playoffs. So he brought Brett Favre in to play ahead of Tavares Jackson, and they went to the NFC Championship game. Don't want to talk about what happened in that NFC Championship game, but that's the truth. This is a long-term build of a culture that is already there. And again, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to play for $10 million either. And you have to have that cap space to go get guys to fill along the defensive line. You got to get some veterans, some good veterans on the offensive interior line, because they're just getting whooped every single week, except for Gary Bradbury, great run blocker. Great. Yeah. But I am sick of him on his back half the game. Like, it does not make sense for this team to bring a character like Aaron Rodgers in. And you know what? Some people will be like, he's a great guy. Actually, he's just misunderstood. He's all for himself, and I don't want that anywhere around this team. So there it is, my Aaron Rodgers rant. Let's get back to the task on hand. Vikings, Bears, what's my prediction? As always, my prediction is pain, like Clubber Lang and Rocky, what was it, 2, 3? My prediction is pain as always. But I don't think pain will signal a Vikings loss in this case. I don't think the Bears are good enough to beat the Vikings. And if they do, we got to have a conversation about what this team is. It's very similar to the way I felt the last couple of weeks with Indianapolis, Jacksonville, and Tennessee. You should win this game If you don't, we have to ask ourselves some questions. We have to ask some questions about the Vikings. But I think the Vikings are good enough to win this game, even though Soldier Field, the whole Soldier Field curse has been lifted a little bit, the curse of Chad Hutchinson or whatever. But I think the Vikings do pull out a win. I'm going to say 23-13, Vikings over the Bears. I reserve the right to change it on social media if somebody gets hurt from here on out. But that's what I got going right now. So that is all we got for the Viking Age podcast today. Go ahead, check out the vikingage.com. We got a lot of stuff to get you ready for the Bears game. I'll have my bold predictions. We always have breaking news going there with a little spin on it to kind of, see what it really means in the big picture. So obviously go on there. You can follow my normal co-host, Adam Patrick, at Adam Patrick NFL. Also, Aaron Schatz. You can follow him on social media as well, as I pulled that up because I am a true professional podcaster here. And my internet is taking forever to load this. Let's see what we got. Aaron Schatz of NFL Fantasy, or FTN Fantasy, I should say. Okay. Aaron A. Schatz NFL. That's ASCHATZ NFL. He also has the same handle over at Instagram, so you could follow him over there. This is the Viking Age podcast, though. I am Chris Schad. I am at the real Chris Schad. Whatever your social media vices, I'm on it. I got Threads. I got Instagram. I got X. I just joined Blue Sky. Whatever you're doing, I'm probably on it. So go ahead and follow me there. We do this every Monday with a late week episode right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. And we are also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. However you consume us, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. For Aaron Schatz coming on the show, I forgot to change the outline. I am Chris Schad. This has been the Viking Age podcast.